I'm Danica Tormohlen reporting for our Trade Show News Network, and I am joined by Ivan and Alice here today. We're in Kansas City at the World Trade Center Association North America Conference. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us. I'm Ivan Barrios, President and CEO of the World Trade Center Miami
And chair
of the North America Committee here at the World Trade Centers Association.
And I'm Alice Ancona. I'm Chief Operating Officer for the World Trade Center Miami.
And what were you telling me, Ivan, about Alice? You can brag on her. So that
I'll tell you a little bit about
Yeah.
Alice. Alice and I have worked together for more than 25 years in economic development, especially promoting trade and commerce for the state of Florida. And when I became president of the World Trade Center Miami, my first hire was Alice Ancona, and that happened in January of 2020. Alice is one of the most knowledgeable people in the state of Florida with the trade numbers and trade policy. She's a former lobbyist for the Florida Chamber of Commerce and the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, and loves to get into the weeds of the numbers and how trade moves. We have a great team at the World Trade Center Miami, and I'm looking forward for the interview.
Let's talk a little bit about big picture. Let's start on the high level of World Trade Center Association. For our listeners who may not be familiar, of course, everybody's familiar with World Trade Centers, but they do operate differently in different locations. Right. And some have trade shows, some don't, some just help with export business. Give us a snapshot of World Trade Center Association through the lens of an event organizer.
I serve on the board of the World Trade Centers Association, and I also chair the North America Regional Committee. There are different World Trade Centers. The World Trade Centers Association is a network of 300 World Trade Centers in 89 countries around the world. Each World Trade Center operates independently. For example, the World Trade Center Miami is a nonprofit 501c6. We have a board of directors of 25 senior business leaders in Miami, and we do events. Our main revenue generator is events. Mainly the America's Food and Beverage Show is our main big event. Other World Trade Centers are owned, let's say, for example, by universities. Other World Trade Centers are owned by municipalities, cities. Other World Trade Centers are owned by the state. Other World Trade Centers are owned by local governments, for example, airports or seaports, or there's other models around the world. But those are the main models of every World Trade Center around the world.
Alice, maybe you could give us some insight into, we were talking earlier about specifically Miami and what you do in terms of the trade show that you produce, the food and beverage show. So give us a snapshot of your work at World Trade Center Miami.
So when we took over in 2020, it was right as the news was beginning to announce COVID. And then we went into a lockdown, temporary lockdown in Miami. But I think globally, every region of the world responded differently. And in the US, and being an event organization, not just the trade shows, but we also do events locally for our community. All of that had to stop. So we had to retool what we did. So we went more into strategic thinking mode. So now the world, when we were going to come out of COVID, and not that we're out of it, but once everything came back online, it was going to be a different world, no doubt. And so what does the World Trade Center have to be in that world, and how do we continue to be successful? And that was what we did. I wrote up a strategic plan. We looked at markets internationally that we should target. How do we grow our shows? How do we leverage the network better? I think at that time, Ivan was being approached to run for the board. And so they eventually had a board election. And so he did get elected to the board, but he was being approached to consider that. And so we talked about, okay, let's say you do get elected. How do we leverage the association better? How does that help us with our shows? How do we engage? How do we collaborate? How do we align the markets that we're interested in with where there's a World Trade Center? So a lot of that happened during that down period of, hey, we're interested in this market. Could that World Trade Center help us? And some are better situated than others. And in some cases, they have been very helpful, especially from an events perspective. We have Arkansas brings companies to our show. We've had a lot of inquiries. Because the other part was the network didn't even know that we had a show. And that was also part of what we discovered was the 300 World Trade Centers, they don't know. So rebranding ourselves and the World Trade Center and our shows was really important. So it was promoting that we had this platform that others could benefit from. And as we talked to other associations, they exhibited greater, like even at this meeting, some of them had not heard about our trade show, how they can participate, how can they engage, can they bring companies that are part of their network into the show. And is there an opportunity for them to be part of it? A few of them have now become part of it. So it's a way to grow our show and to grow what we do is to leverage the network that we have. And that was part of thinking strategically about not just World Trade Center Miami and our shows and what we do, but also how does that align with the network that's currently there that we're a part of?
So, for example, we went to the Global Business Forum, first one in India 2 years ago, 2023. And we started establishing connections at that. So that's when the whole network gets together, has their annual General Assembly, but also has the Global Business Forum. It was 24,
It's
sorry.
24.
Anyway,
An India list.
so we went to Bangalore. We participated. We became a sponsor of the event, World Trade Center. We took our lead sales agent and we started making connections. Connections take a while to build, but now we have an India pavilion at our food show. So it took about 18 months for that. We went to Marseille this year in February, and we also sponsored, came back with about 78 leads. We're working on those leads, but we have already sold exhibit booths due to that network, meeting with the network, talking to different World Trade Centers. And that's what's helped us move our show.
Let's step back just for a second. I learned about it this morning about the food and beverage show. So give us the snapshot of it, number of exhibitors, number of attendees, the growth of it since 22, the event that you ended up selling that you're now managing. So just for our audience, they would really care about the trade show for sure.
So we looked at the trade show. That was part of that pause. So
Yeah.
as terrible as COVID was, it also gave us a moment to reflect. And instead of just being go, we had 9 trips planned when we took over and all of them went away. So we looked internally and we looked at revamping the show and how we can make it better. And being food and beverage, like the entire world eats, this should be a huge show. And it was just one hall at the time. You had about 400 to 500 exhibitors, depending on the year. 3,500 used to walk in the door. It was a very regional show when we inherited the organization. Last year, it was now in 2 halls. We're in 3 halls this year. It's 2 halls. We had over 700 exhibitors, and we're now at 10,000 people taking badges. And it's not open to the public. These are people that have walked in and spent an amount of time at the show. They're buyers, they're distributors, they're importers, they're wholesalers, etc. So we focused on being much more strategic at the show, not just in the recruitment of the companies and leveraging the network, but also in our strategy of how we promote the show and targeting buyers. So I think a lot of shows are exhibitor focused. We're buyer focused because the buyers bring the exhibitors. If exhibitors know that there's going to be buyers in the show, then that show has a high ROI for them. And so we survey our exhibitors, and last year the survey came back at 92% ROI and 55% expecting a sale at the show. And that's because we pivoted to being buyer driven, focusing on recruiting the right kinds of buyers that are there. And then when we approached the exhibitors, we wanted to make sure that they were export ready, whether it's exporting to the US or US exporting abroad, whatever that export means for your company, wherever you are coming from around the world. The idea is that you need to be ready to make a sale so that the show is where people make deals. We know that we have pavilions. The Dominican Republic reported 8 containers sold at the show. Others have big buyer meetings. But if over 55% were expecting a deal and they walked out with a good lead and a prospect, we facilitated a lot of that through benefits that we included in the show for that reason. But we focused on that buyer component heavily. That was a big part of what we did starting off the bat because it is our bigger show. We worked on Air Cargo Americas, which was our second show at that time. And it did grow a little bit, but that show had a lot of competition. And Mesa Munchen was already in Miami. There were other organizations that were doing similar trade shows in the market. And so when Mesa approached us for a partnership, it then evolved into a conversation about, hey, maybe we do sell the show. And we still remain part of it, and Mesa Munchen wanted us to be part of it. So that was a natural. And I think, Ivan, you've been working with them for a long time.
There was a relationship.
There was already a relationship.
Because
we're not strangers. So we felt that the show could grow, but maybe it wasn't us that could grow it, even though we would still be part of it. And so the sale was not so much we're getting rid of a show. It was also because we also wanted to focus on the things that matter to us. And we wanted to start new events, new programs, new shows. And this one was one that already faced so much competition with for-profits. We're a not-profit. We're a private not-profit. How many resources are we really going to put into something that there's a lot of competition? So that's a lot of what we've been doing is the strategic thinking behind what makes sense, what aligns with our mission and vision, what aligns with our strategic plan, and then what resources can we leverage and how do we better leverage those relationships.
And then coming out of COVID, we had an entirely new board of directors. They wanted us to also start a membership program and run as an association also.
Restart it.
Restart it, basically.
Yeah.
Revamp it, restart it. So we started a membership program. We started networking events for our members. We now have an annual general membership meeting. We've revived the International Achievement Award and the International Hall of Fame. It's one of those people who have done the most to help promote Miami as the international trade center that it is. So not only do we run trade shows, but now we're running an association.
You also said before we came on camera that it also has a hosted buyer component, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So that was part of being a buyer-focused show. So the exhibitors will come with the value is there. The value is there is somebody that wants to buy their stuff, whatever that may be. So we added 2 buyer programs, a regular buyer, just to track the buyers and understand what they're looking for so that we can promote the exhibitors of their categories or the products they're looking to buy to them, just to have their data. And then we have a hosted buyer program where we do active recruitment. We contract in some cases, sometimes they apply through us. So we do have contractors that are out there doing vetting and recruiting buyers based on certain markets that we have an interest of recruiting buyers from. And then those that apply directly to the show. And we review their application. There is a requirement. We do cover their part of their travel expenses, their hotel, and they have to have 8 meetings throughout all 3 days of the show. And then, of course, there's a survey that they need to do at the end. And then we verify with the exhibitor how the meeting went. But that's something that we started about 2 years ago just to attract different types of buyers and higher caliber buyers because we do have great companies with great products, but the show is also a different kind of show. It's heavy international compared to other U.S. shows. And that's really how we distinguish ourselves. So the buyers have to be different as well. And so in doing the surveys from buyer feedback, about 49% of those buyers don't go to any other show in the U.S. because it is an international show. Ivan mentioned something, the new product showcase, and we focus on new products. The buyers are also looking for something new. So we spend a lot of time promoting the new products that are at the show and having exhibitors tell us what is new to market, what is new to their product offering, because buyers are looking for that new thing. And so those are 2 unique attributes that help us attract the right buyers, help us work on the hosted buyer program, is that they align with what we believe. The show is for small and medium-sized enterprises. The show features new products, and the show has an international component, which differentiates us from other shows.
And then we have a conference program, a 3-day conference program designed to help the small and medium-sized companies with everything in the food and beverage industry, from packaging your product, what are the nutritional requirements, how to transport your product. And we have them in English and Spanish. So we have those seminars going on also.
So let's talk a little bit about the impact of tariffs on your business in terms of, we were talking about it as a group earlier today. So maybe let's talk about it here. So how is it impacting your business? And then what solutions are you deploying to address it?
Yeah, we
I
had
think yes, it was just more of adapting to the market, just like we had to adapt during COVID. It's COVID part 2 without the masks. That's really how you have to see it is, okay, here's another disruption. There's always a disruption in trade, whether it's tariffs, whether it's geopolitics, whether it's the war in Ukraine, whether it's COVID. Supply chains are vulnerable to changes in market dynamics. And those market dynamics happen all the time. So if you're involved in international trade, any of these companies, small, medium, large, whatever what it is, I would say you have to be ninja level if you're involved in international trade because you have to adapt to a constantly changing environment. We're in Florida. We have to do business in the middle of hurricane season. There are always risks and there's always something that's out there that will impact supply chains and impact trades. And right now it is tariffs. So it's just a matter of adapting. You can't mitigate for everything. You can't offset for anything. So we see our role as an association, and many of the people in the room see their role as an association as servicing their members and servicing the companies that are there by helping them, directing them to tools, whether it's foreign trades on operations, bonded warehousing, for sale, duty drawback, or using other markets. Okay, maybe this year the U.S. is not who you're selling to, but you know what? At the show, we have the Caribbean. At the show, we also have Latin America. Others are looking for private label manufacturers. Now you're not going to ship your product into the U.S., but you're going to set up some sort of manufacturing partnership through an existing U.S. company that's FDA regulated, certified, whatever. and you now have a contract with them, and you're now avoiding everything because you're making your product in the US. So maybe you didn't, it's not nearshoring or reshoring, but it's using private label manufacturers in the US to produce your product. So it's adapting, it's looking at opportunities to help companies be successful. The idea is for them to ensure that there is an opportunity at the show. There's still an opportunity in international trade. Global trade still exists. It's just constantly,
Changing.
consistently
Yeah.
shifting.
Yeah.
Things have changed. Imagine we went from sending a fax to place an order, and now you do it by cell phone. That those are monumental shifts that sometimes are technology based, sometimes it's geopolitics. But there's always something in international trade. And right now it's tariffs. Once we're done with this, it'll be something else.
Yeah.
There's always something else.
So our conference session will include some of these topics on tariffs and how people mitigate the tariffs. I'm glad Alice brought it up. There's always a disruption in trade because especially in Miami or the state of Florida, we've been able to adapt every time. And I don't know if it's because of our geographical location, the companies, the concentration of small and medium-sized companies that do international business in the state of Florida, we've always been able to adapt.
Miami has a trade center, and this is a pitch to sell Miami. But we're truly proud. It's not without merit. So Miami International Airport is one of the number one in international freight for the U.S. It's top 10 airport for international freight globally. During COVID, it was one of the most active airports in the U.S. Well, everything was on a standstill, and not just port in general, because of the nature of what it moves, which is mainly perishable. It moves 90% of all the flowers that are sold in the U.S. enter through that one airport. 60% of the perishables that enter the U.S. enter through that one airport. And so it requires a workforce that is high skilled, time sensitive. Pharmaceuticals come in. We're a pharma certified airport. So the nature, we get horses, we get reptiles, we get, see, if I tell you the data on all of the types of products that come in, there's horses coming in that are in that airport. There's few ports that handle time sensitive and even live animals to the degree and not just time sensitive, but also temperature sensitive products that come in. So it's a very sophisticated workforce that is accustomed to not just moving things quickly, but also moving highly sensitive products. And so we're accustomed to this volatility. Things will change. And so you develop a lot of resources and tools that are there in Miami in the form of our workforce. Our greatest asset, aside from our location, it's our workforce that is an expert in moving these kinds of products. The industry knows that, which is why we're a trade center. Just like Kansas City is a trade center, just like you would see in other parts that are great trading centers. Miami is a sophisticated trade center reason because of the level of workforce that's there. And that's attracted the logistics companies. And so you have this massive resource that's available to companies that are trying to navigate all these uncertainties, whether it's now, whether what happened during COVID, whether what happened during Ukraine, whatever it may be, we have the resources available and we have the talent that's there to help companies do that, which is why we're very positive about this because we've always been adapting. We had Andrew, everything was knocked down. We still had to move forward. We have hurricanes on a regular basis that disrupt trade. Those are natural things that you can't predict a hurricane. You can predict that there's a hurricane season. It's going to hit Florida. It'll hit a port. It'll eventually hit a port and it'll impact our ability to move cargo. But at the end of the day, we'll revamp, we retool, and we get back online. And so our positivity is based on just decades of experience.
Dealing with other
dealing with
and it's so funny. There's a hurricane in Miami. Miami is shut down. Fort Lauderdale is shut down. But everybody's, okay, when's the port get open? When's the gas going to get here? And then but it's not everybody's like their hair on fire. They know it's going to come and they know, and we adapt. And it's so funny because everybody knows the Port of Miami doesn't handle the gasoline or the oil. It comes from Port Everglades, and everybody's like, okay, so when the freighter gets there, this place is going to get gas. And they're all waiting, and we're all adapting.
I want to ask you one final question about, do you have a message for exhibitors and attendees when you think about tariffs in particular? I know earlier today when we were in that other room, people were talking about one message being like, don't panic.
Yeah,
like there are different alternatives to still do business to get around the tariffs, whether it's going to differ by sector, particularly by sector.
It's very sector specific.
Yeah.
So a lot of that
So elaborate on that.
Yeah. So it is sector specific. So I did tell you about two instances for us. Our food show, the world eats. You're not going to stop eating. And regardless of the tariffs, you're still going to go to the supermarket and things may or may not cost more. But our food show, we're very confident in that. An event that we did suspend until next year is Aerospace Defense America. And that's because that sector was going to be heavily impacted from the tariffs. And so we did hearing from the industry right now is probably not a good time. And so we are not the only ones. There's other trade shows that may have pivoted, other events that may have been suspended or temporarily postponed because of the sectors that they represent and that were impacted by tariffs. So it's not to say we have a perfect example of just one show is going to be okay and it's going to be expected to do well. The other one, we're just going to time out until next year. So what we tell companies is maybe you're not going to invest in this project this year, or maybe you invest in a different way. You have to think strategically. Don't panic. This is the time to plan. This is the time to look at resources that you have and maybe you reallocate them in a different way. So we talked about a little bit about the advice that we give exhibitors, whether it is moving to a foreign trade zone, whether it's maybe using a bonded warehouse, maybe it's private labeling and using a manufacturer in the US to produce your product. And those were things that exhibitors were asking about before the tariffs, because it's a smart thing to do. You're transporting product from a very far away place and you're spending a lot on transportation. It might make more sense already to move to a private label operation in the US. And that could lead to investment. That could lead to other things. But there's a lot of ways to run your operation depending on your industry sector that can help mitigate for these things. So it's a lot of information resource, but it's more about planning. Don't panic, plan. Look at what you're doing, rethink, and then pivot accordingly. But trade is always like that. That's the thing. If you're involved in international trade, what you did 10 years ago, you're not doing today.
It's the nature of the business.
It's the nature of that. I just told you, this is COVID without the mask. Supply chain shifted during COVID. Supply chains are shifting right now. So it's for different reasons, but they did shift and they are shifting.
You talked about sector, but then you also talked about regionally, right? Like in terms of international, like Canada, the Caribbean being still an attractive market. So just delve into that for 1 second and tell us about the impact of international travel, visas, the regional.
For example, for the food show, we lost our Canadian pavilion. Basically, we only have one company left exhibiting. We've lost our German pavilion. Other countries have mitigated their presence at the show. In terms of buyers, we don't see buyers registering as fast as they are. We've seen buyers that have had to get visas, have already declined visas. So all those are little challenges, but we expect in 2026 they're getting better. We've told the people like Canadian companies or the German company, come back in 2026. We'll hold your space. We want you back and let us know what we can do to help you come back. But those are some of the challenges that we've been facing because of the current situation. But again, we're not panicking. Instead, we're moving forward. We're continuing to travel, promote the show. We're now going to the UK. We're going to Colombia. We're going to Peru to promote the show.
We're going back to Brazil.
Yeah.
So we were already in Brazil. So our international travel didn't stop.
Yeah.
It's just, we looked at different markets and we looked at where the opportunity might be and you pivot.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. Don't panic, pivot.
And there's also 2026. Don't just think of this is it. Think ahead of time. Start planning now. It's like we ask all our exhibitors that they come, do your research. If you have buyers that you want to invite from anywhere in the world, let us know. We'll invite them to the show. Give them a free pass. We want you to do the deal. We want you to do the deal in Miami. And that's what we want.
There's also the digital component. Okay, so you're not able to sample the product, but maybe you still are able to connect with the company digitally. And so what we're looking is we're pushing the digital part. We're already used to that. That's the tool accelerated during COVID is all of a sudden people were like, okay, I don't have to get on our plane. I can do these things. This meeting can be a virtual meeting. So you could buy things without having to be in person to buy it. And so the digital aspect is still there. And that's part of what we're going to be leveraging more for this year is we're pivoting. Okay, you can't come, but there's still a way for you to participate in the show digital. We have our exhibitors in a virtual platform already. That existed from 2-3 years ago. So as exhibitors come on, they set up their profile, buyers can see it. And from everywhere all over the world. And if they're interested in that product, they can contact the company directory and they can still do the sale. And okay, it meant that they didn't get to exhibit it in the show. It doesn't matter. We're a trade association. Our role is to promote trade. however it may happen, whether it is you show up at the show or you connect through one of our exhibitors virtual. So there's many ways to still be able to participate. It's just providing people with those opportunities as well as tools, as well as the education for them to do that. We see ourselves as a platform for international business. And you connect to us in whatever way makes sense for you, whether it's showing up for one of our trade shows, attending one of our events, joining as a member, or connecting to us digitally, or being in our office, or whatever it may be, or us visiting you. There's many ways that you can connect and still continue to do international business. But we are a platform, and we're very dynamic, or very flexible. And that flexibility, I think, has allowed us to remain positive, is that we have to be flexible. That's just the nature.
We want to see business grow. We want to see small and medium-sized companies grow.
And they still can.
Yeah.
And they still can.
One other thing, we talked about the impact of tariffs. One impact being that you had to revise budgets, right?
Yes.
And cut expenses in order to hit your numbers. So elaborate on that here during our interview, if you want.
For example, it's just like when the economy downturns. Basically, that's what we're doing. We're adjusting. Yeah, it has affected us, but we're still moving on with the digital platform. We're still doing our traveling. Yes, of course, we didn't expand our office. We didn't hire the people that we didn't hire. We didn't do certain programs that we didn't want to do. But we're also planning for when all this is over. We're still planning for 2026 and beyond. So we look at it, or at least I look at it as, okay, this is like an economic downturn right now. What was it, in 28 when the economy took a downturn for 3 years? This is looking at it the same. You have to adjust, move on, plan for it, and go for it and plan forward. And that's what we do.
And we're sensitive that there's companies that are really impacted in a very negative. We're lucky that we haven't let anybody go. And we understand that that may not be the case for many international companies. I think we have to recognize that. For us, we've been fortunate in that sense that we've seen so many of these shifts that we've built in that uncertainty, that there's always going to be pockets of uncertainty throughout the years. And we're able to mitigate for that to a great deal, not 100%, but to a good extent, because we understand that international trade comes with its
Challenges.
pitfalls and challenges and level of uncertainty. And so there are companies for sure. And we do have exhibitors that I know are not going to come back because this year's going to be a bad year because of maybe the inputs of their products, because they're a manufacturer, because maybe the orders are not coming down. So we tell them, look, we understand this year it's probably not good, and next year we'll see you. We have the list for 2024 still available to buyers. So all the exhibitors that existed that exhibited in 2024, they're still there. So we try to find ways to still help them, to still make them visible to whatever extent we can, understanding that some of them may be struggling. This is probably not going to be easy for a lot of companies, smaller companies that may not have resources to help them mitigate for this. For us, we were able to. We're very fortunate to be able to. But we also recognize that there are companies that may not be able to others.
And we try to make it easy for them to come to our show. We haven't raised prices in 2 years. We're still below our competitors. We do focus on small and medium-sized companies, and we try to give them as much value added as we can, because that's what we do as a nonprofit, and that's what we do as a company.
Last question. How are you pacing on exhibitors and attendance for the food show in the fall right now compared to last year?
I would say it's a little behind.
We're a little behind,
but not terribly.
One drops off, but something comes up. Like we really did not expect to have the India Pavilion. And that had its own challenges because we needed exhibitors that already had a U.S. visa, because the visa process in India is way too long.
It's slow. It's taking a long time.
2 years.
We were able to recruit 13 Indian companies to the show.
But that was, again, tied back to the partnership of we went to Bangalore, we went to the Global Business Forum, we went with pavilion organizers and associations. And one of those associations that we met with has companies that are export ready, and many of them have visas. So it's pivoting and then leveraging the network that exists to try to identify where the opportunity is. So we were able to do that, and it started back then. They continued. They had a lot of interest, but they had companies that their executives had visas, and they were export ready.
And that's the beauty of the World Trade Centers Association network. It's a network. You're connected. And if you don't know what's going on, somebody in the network will. But through the World Trade Centers Association, we've been able to make contacts in Japan, in India, in France, in Italy, So we're working on making all these contacts, and you work through the network. And that's one of the beauties of the World Trade Centers Association and the network of different World Trade Centers.
Yeah. So the sky is not falling. You had to readjust budgets and readjust expenses, but it's not falling off the face of the earth in 2025.
Right.
You're just filling it in with different different regions of the country,
Different
specifically
products,
different products
and opportunity. And that's how we came up with the digital.
It was a pivot.
Don't spend your money on traveling. You still want to exhibit, participate in the show. Let's do it digitally.
We're going to find a way to get you
We're
there.
going to find it.
Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate
Thanks.
it. Danica Tormohlen reporting for Trade Show News Network.